Thank you.
On duty again. Nice to see you.
Good to see you, yeah.
Nice to see you.
I
Madam
haven't met,
President,
I don't think so. I'm
Oh,
Marshall,
I didn't know
excuse me,
already.
I'm Marshall Cohen.
Oh, nice to
I've
meet
been
you.
in photography here for 34 years.
Wow, that's fantastic.
One roll of film, and then I changed to digital.
Me too, I used to do that.
Anyway, nice meeting you.
Me too.
Have a good year.
Thank you.
oh, she's off to a great start.
Oh,
There you go.
it's good to see you. Thanks for coming.
Will you both
So
be
you were
sitting
saying
during the
you'll
interview,
take
asking
that?
questions and all?
Yes, yes, we'll both be sitting there.
The camera, it's not actually plugged into the
Just
wall.
to send it down.
Yeah, and I think she's leaving a little early from my understanding, so hopefully she'll get here soon.
Talk fast and shoot fast.
I know, I'll try. Try.
That's unusual in Ireland, once they
Yeah,
stop
right?
speaking.
I know, I think she's got a meeting, another meeting coming up, so. We'll see. I'm gonna sit on this side this time. Oh, wait, we don't have the mug.
Well, I know she's here because she walked through
Oh, you did see her?
earlier. yeah.
Oh, okay.
I think so. Tall, attractive, white-haired woman. Pretty sure it was her.
Is our guest going to be speaking from the podium and then?
I think both of us will speak from the podium and then we usually sit and then just pin it on. Is that right? On our
Yes.
laptop?
So you're going to want it to, you're going to want yours to go on this side and theirs to go on that side. So that
Okay.
as you turn to talk to each other, you turn it towards
Okay.
your mics.
That's smart, okay.
You'll be good to go
Like right there?
right there would be the best place.
All right, perfect. Thank you.
Sure thing.
Let's see.
You're not gonna go far.
Celia, could you, well, I'll get the president. I just wanted someone to sit there, so I get a read. But we're all set. Thanks anyway.
How are you?
Hi, good, thank you.
Great.
When it's time for the mic to go on, it should go right here.
Here? Sure.
Right
On your
here.
jacket.
On
On
your
your jacket. Okay.
Give me a second to start with the process.
I guess you're safe. I might take my mask off.
Good afternoon and welcome to the National Press Club, the place where news happens. I'm Aileen O'Reilly, the 2023 president of the National Press Club. I'm also the managing editor at Axios in charge of our standards and training. I'm delighted that we have Michelle O'Neill here, Vice President of Sinn Féin and First Minister-elect of Northern Ireland, here to speak with us today. Earlier this week, President Biden announced his plan to visit Northern Ireland and the Republic of Ireland to mark the 25th anniversary of the Good Friday Agreement. Under the terms of the Good Friday Agreement that brought peace to Northern Ireland, both the Unionist Party and the Nationalist Party must share power at Stormont, the seat of Northern Ireland's government. But in February of 2022, Northern Ireland's government ground to a halt. The Democratic Unionist Party, which is the largest Unionist party in Northern Ireland, withdrew its First Minister, Paul Givan, from the Northern Ireland government in protest over the Northern Ireland Protocol. The Northern Ireland Protocol is a post-Brexit trade agreement that left it subject to European Union customs rules, even though, as part of Great Britain, it resides outside of the EU. Given's resignation meant Ms. O'Neill, then the Deputy First Minister, also ceased to hold office. In last May's election, O'Neill's party, which seeks unification with Ireland, won a plurality of seats in the Northern Ireland Assembly. That entitles her to become First Minister, the first Irish Republican to hold that position, but only if the DUP ministers return to government. Now the UK and EU have renegotiated an agreement to replace the Northern Ireland Protocol. The UK government hopes the new agreement, called the Windsor Framework, will end the political stalemate. But the DUP says it needs more time to study the agreement and resolve some concerns. Our guest today, First Minister-elect O'Neill, says the DUP is dragging its feet because it doesn't want an Irish nationalist as First Minister. With the new post-Brexit trade agreement in place, she said, it's essential to restore the Northern Ireland government without delay. We're looking forward to hearing more from Ms. O'Neill, who was elected to the Northern Ireland Assembly in 2007 and appointed Deputy First Minister and Joint Head of Government in January 2020. She has also served as a Minister of Agriculture and Rural Development and as a Minister of Health. After her remarks, we will be accepting questions. Please write them as legibly as possible. I can't ask what I can't read. On the cards at your seat, and I will ask as many as possible as time permits. She will have to leave a bit early for another engagement. Please join me in welcoming First Minister-elect Michelle O'Neill.
Thank you very much, Eileen. Great pleasure to be here this afternoon with you and to have a chance to have some conversation just about how things currently are. I'm obviously really delighted to be in Washington this week, given all of the festivities around the annual St. Patrick's celebrations, particularly at the White House, to mark our National Day. And also, I think it's always about marking the close bonds and the friendship, the heritage, and crucially, our partnership for peace and prosperity with the United States. In the coming weeks, we will mark our 25th anniversary of of our peace agreement of signing of the 1998 Good Friday Peace Accord. And that peace accord itself was painstakingly negotiated at that time, and it was made possible due to the very vast and substantial contribution from the United States under the administration of President Clinton. President Clinton at that time, he had appointed Senator George Mitchell as a special envoy to specifically aid and support our Irish peace process, and to support everyone from across the communities, everybody that came together and took those necessary risks for peace. They held a very strong belief that peace was going to be achievable, but also that peace and stability and economic prosperity were all interconnected. And there is absolutely no doubt that over the last 25 years, our society has been completely and truly transformed. The Good Friday Peace Accord is one of the Clinton administration's foreign policy successes, and we are very thankful, as always, for the continued support from then and until today, and the fact that the United States continues to remain as a critical partner for peace. And that has been reaffirmed just as recently as we've seen the appointment of another US Special Envoy by Joe Kennedy III. And yesterday I was delighted to get a chance actually to meet with Joe, and I really look forward to working with him and how we can deepen further US investment opportunities and economic growth to the benefit of all of our economies at home. We have developed close economic ties, no doubt, with the US, with many, many companies who have chosen to come and to invest in Ireland, and we're very grateful for that. Some people who have reinvested, new people that are coming on board, and that's something that we're very, very grateful for. I think that whenever we look back, and this particularly in this anniversary year, and we look at everything that's been achieved, we look at the journey that we've travelled over the past 25 years, and we do so to reflect on all of that. But very much this anniversary is about looking forward, and it's about the next 25 years. It's about hope. It's about ambition. It's about better. It's about us all working together in the time ahead. So in recent weeks, we have seen the agreement secured between the European Union and the British government in regards to the Irish Protocol. And that in itself mitigates against the worst impact of Brexit on our island. And it does a number of fundamental things. It protects the Good Friday Peace Accord. It gives us access to the single market, so we now have access to both markets. It ensures the all-island economy and supply chains are protected. And crucially, it avoids a hard border on our island. So I think the fact that we now have this new deal, it gives huge opportunity again and a huge competitive advantage for us as a small economy, because we become this gateway to Europe for the sale of goods and into both markets, as I said. So it's something that we now need to grab onto and seize it with both hands. Certainly, I think there are many challenges ahead of us, but there are many more opportunities, and those are the things that we need to be focused on. This week for us, particularly here, has been started off very well. When we have, as you've said, Eileen, we've just had the announcement of a presidential visit and that Joe Biden will come to Ireland. And that, again, given the year that's in it, it's hugely, hugely important. And it sends, once again, that strongest of messages of support from the USA that we continue to enjoy that solidarity, that support for peace, for stability, and for economic prosperity in Ireland. And I obviously would be very, very delighted to welcome the President to Belfast as we celebrate the 25 years of peace. Because last year, and Eileen referenced this, that 9 months ago, we had an election at home. And 9 months ago, the people voted in that democratic election, an assembly election. But yet, the outcome of that election is still to be respected and to be honoured. And we still don't have a power-sharing coalition formed at this point. But the fundamental is that the democratic outcome of the election must be respected. That's not an option. That's the democratic norm. So the onus is now very much on the British government and the Irish government as the co-guarantors of the agreement to ensure that to work with the storming parties, not least the DUP, to get back to business, to get around the executive table, form a government, one which will support workers, families and communities. So as the eyes of the world turn again to Belfast once more, let us take the opportunity that we have ahead of us to attract investment, create jobs for our young people, and to deliver the change that people rightly demand and expect. I, as an incoming First Minister, am determined to play my part and to lead, and I am absolutely determined to work across party lines, to work with others, to make politics work, to be someone who focuses on cooperation with others, and to serve every single citizen as a First Minister for all. Thank you very much. Thank you.
Mics.
Okay, sorry.
Okay. All right. So we had Sir Jeffrey Donaldson here yesterday, and he talked a lot about how they still have concerns about the Windsor framework. What is your assessment of the points the DUP has raised?
So I think that, I mean, the agreement has only been reached in the last number of weeks, so I think it's very normal that everybody wants to work their way through the detail of it. We all do that, that's due diligence, that's our job. But for me, what I can see from the very outset is that the fundamentals that I talked about are protected. So the protection of the Good Friday Agreement, that it doesn't do jeopardy to the Good Friday Agreement, that's a crucially important point. But I think that what the agreement does now is actually opens up the door for the politics to start to work again at home. So the DUP, as a tactic, decided to walk away from the executive in order to influence a negotiation between the EU and the British government. But that negotiation is now complete. That job is done. As I said, we work our way through the detail of that, but I think that should no longer be a barrier to their participation in the executive, and I continue to encourage them to do their work, do their due diligence, but you know, we all need to give space and time. It can't be endless. We can't be in a limbo forever. So I encourage them to do their homework and to get around the executive table with the rest of us, and let's get an executive up and running, and actually let's focus on the opportunities that we now have, particularly given the fact that we're going to have a presidential visit hopefully in the next number of weeks.
Okay. Does your party have any concerns about the framework that you know of yet?
Yes, we do have some concerns, but I think they're concerns that we can deal with in parallel to a fully functioning Stormont. We have some concerns, particularly in relation to this thing that's been described as a Stormont break. What exactly does that mean? And to this point, the British government haven't published what legislative change they may make to facilitate such a break. Some have heralded this break as a unionist veto. That is not my understanding of what it is. So that's one of the areas that I'd be concerned of, that I think that we need to, I suppose, dissect a bit more. But until we actually see the legislative text, that's really, really difficult. And that would be our position. It would be the position of the other parties. It would probably be the position of the Irish government equally. So everybody's waiting to see what this legislative change looks like. I think that there'll be other things that will probably need to be perhaps tweaked in the time ahead, you know, new trading realities and practices, but we have a forum in which we can fix those things. So none of these things should be barriers to us being in a fully functioning assembly and executive. And again, I make the point because it is so, so important. In this 25th anniversary year, we need to be making politics work. We need to be fulfilling the promise and the hope of the Good Friday Agreement. And I want to meet the President of the United States in Belfast when he comes to mark that occasion of the Good Friday anniversary, when we're working together, when we're making politics work as all of the parties together.
If there is no resolution by the anniversary of the Good Friday Agreement on April 10th, what does that say about the success and longevity of that agreement? Do you think, is that, fragile? Is that peace fragile, or?
No, our peace is solid.
Okay.
Our peace is solid. Our peace is secure. There is no going back ways. We are going on one forward journey, and I don't think anybody would want to see that. Of course, there are small pockets or elements of people who would want to drag things back, but we're not going to allow that. So just to make that point crystal clear, the peace is secure and stable. I think that if we got to the anniversary, it would be really regrettable if we didn't have the institutions up and working. Our politics is very challenging at the best of times. A 5-party coalition, people trying to work together, different aspirations, that's challenging for anybody to manage, but particularly given our political circumstance, it's even more difficult. That being said, I believe in power sharing. I'm a leader of the Good Friday Agreement generation, someone who was 20 years of age whenever the agreement was signed, and power sharing is the only show in town. So it's for all of the parties to try to make it work. So I'm going to work on the basis of the hope and the optimism that we do actually have it up and running for the Good Friday Agreement anniversary, because despite all of the challenges of the politics of the north of Ireland, I think that there's no doubt that it is one of the most successful peace accords. It's been a lasting peace, challenging but a lasting peace, and it's completely transformed our society. So despite the challenges, it's something we should be very, very proud of, and everybody that played a part in bringing it about and who plays a part every day to try to sustain it and maintain it and deliver on the promise of it.
How has Brexit and the related understandings regarding Northern Ireland complicated sustaining the goals and outcomes of the Good Friday Agreement?
So Brexit and the Good Friday Agreement were never compatible. There was always going to be hugely challenging position, and I believe that the British government have played a very negative and unhelpful role in not embracing the Good Friday Agreement and the implications of Brexit on the Good Friday Agreement. And I think for the past 7 years, the root cause of the political and economic turmoil that we have, Brexit has been at the core of that. So it's just never been compatible, and that's why we sought to try to find mitigation. And the mitigation against the protocol came in the form, or the mitigation against Brexit came in the form of the protocol, which protected the all-island economy, which protected the Good Friday Agreement. And those fundamentals were really, really, really important. So I think that when we found that mitigation, and then we had a British government with previous prime ministers, either Boris Johnson or Liz Truss, people who couldn't be trusted, who the Europeans couldn't do business with, who couldn't strike a deal with because they continually reneged on political agreements that were made. And even further than that, they legislated to breach international law. So how are we ever going to get to a point where there'd be a genuine agreement on how they could improve how the protocol was working? I think I welcome, and it's rare for an Irish Republican, to agree with the British Prime Minister at times. But in this regard, Richie Sunak came in to his position as the new British Prime Minister, and he brought a different pragmatism. He realised that they had, as a political party, the Tories had done huge damage to the economy in Britain, and he knew that he needed a deal, more so because of their own national interest. And in particular, again, this is why the role of America is so important, because the pressure point for the British government was always that they wanted to secure a trade deal with the United States. And in order to achieve that, it was very clear from influential figures here that there would be no prospect of such a trade deal if they did cause jeopardy to the Good Friday Agreement. So I think those things combined meant that we then had a Prime Minister who wanted to cut a deal with Europe, and I'm very, very glad that we've now got to that point.
Good. So Ireland is facing a cost of living crisis. What do you think needs to be done to alleviate that crisis?
A fully functioning executive and assembly would be a good start. People are going through the hardest of times, and they're worried about how they're putting food on their table. They're worried about how they're going to keep a roof over their head or heat their homes. And they're having to make very, very difficult choices. So this is the time whenever politics should be at its best, helping people who need your help the most. So not having an executive through this period's been a real disappointment, because we haven't been able to help people in the way in which we would have liked to. Previous to the executive collapsing, there were a number of things that we were able to do to try to help people to put money into their pockets, essentially. So I think that then we've had a number of supports that came directly via the British government. But again, I need an executive up and running in which to have ministers at their desk and actually try to bring forward packages that support people to get through this period.
Oh, sorry. Thank you. So Northern Ireland has been, as you mentioned, without a functioning government for more than a year. Can you enumerate for us what impact that's had, and some more examples?
Well, I think the cost of living example is a really, really good example to go through these times. I mean, these are unprecedented times. We haven't been in this space before. They're the hardest of, it's one of the most hardest financial climates for people to be through, and for us not to have an executive to deal with that. We've our public sector health workers out on strike. We've had many public sector workers out on strike for fair pay and working conditions. And again, we haven't been able to respond to that because we're not around the executive table. Any society in the world needs a functioning government, people who are going to take decisions on policies that impact their lives. So that's I think that's definitely the deficit that's there when we don't have a functioning executive and assembly, and then the people that we represent are being subjected to policy decisions being taken by the Tory party in London, and they have no say on that. That's not how democracy works. So that's why we need to have our own locally elected ministers, because it'll be locally elected ministers that will always take decisions in the best interests of the people that we serve.
Mm-hmm. You suggested last week on Sky News that if the DUP refused to come back to government, the only alternative might be some sort of governance arrangement between the UK and Ireland. Tell us what you meant by that.
So in the past, we've had a system of direct rule where ministers in London ruled and governed and made policy decisions that impacted on the people here. But the Good Friday Agreement ended all of that. We have our own now local arrangements, and those arrangements need to be up and working and to be respected. But in the absence, and I make the point before I make the second point, I'll make the first point, which is my priority is to get the executive up and running. That's where we should be, working together and doing our best. If that's not to be the case, and if the DUP refuse to come back in and honour the election result from last May and work with the rest of us to make politics work, then there will be no return to direct rule as it was in the years gone by. The only alternative to that scenario of a fully functioning executive and assembly has to be some sort of partnership arrangement with the British government and the Irish government, who are co-guarantors of the peace agreement itself. Now, what shape and form that takes, that would always obviously be all up for discussion, but that's where it has to go. We can't go back it can never go back to direct rule of the past. But again, my priority is to make politics work and to get the executive up and running.
What do you hope can be achieved in regards to government and trade both before and during Biden's visit?
I just think it's such a huge anniversary. So when we mark 25 years of the Good Friday Agreement, we reflect on everything that's been achieved, the societal transformation. It's been a huge success economically as well. And as I said, there was a number of companies that actually came and invested in Ireland directly as a result of the Good Friday Agreement, people who have reinvested, and then that list has been added to immensely. So we hope that, and I hope that the anniversary is around, and the focus of the anniversary is around hope, opportunity, and it is about increased investment. It is about creating opportunities, better jobs, better paid jobs, and all those opportunities that comes with it. We're a very skilled workforce at home. With young people who will work hard, and any company will be very delighted to have them. So we think we've got something to offer in terms of a skilled workforce. And I think that President Biden's visit will be a real catalyst for the economic investment that we can say to the world, because the international stage will again be on our small part of the world. And I think what we need to say is that our doors are open. We want to have partners, we want investment and trade opportunities. And I just think that has to be an opportunity we have to grab onto and really, really capitalise.
How would you characterize, you talked a little bit about this already, but U.S. and Northern Ireland relations now? So.
It's as strong as ever, I believe. I believe that, the US was absolutely a crucial component part to us actually achieving what we achieved back in 1998. And that has never waned. That has stayed with us the whole way through. And I think the strong statements, as I said, in relation to potential trade deals with Britain, the fact that that would not happen if there was jeopardy to the Good Friday Agreement, I think all of those things show us and demonstrate to us in word and deed that the support here is rock solid. Who else gets to come to the United States for St. Patrick's Day /week, which it now is, and get to sell our wares, effectively get to meet investors, meet people on the Hill, people who are keeping a really key interest in what we're doing at home. So I just think that it's just a fantastic relationship, and I hope that it stays this way for forever and a day.
What do you say to those who are concerned about being beholden to EU rules despite not being in the EU?
I think that there are going to be avenues for us. You see, what we've achieved is access to the European market. That is a huge economic advantage. There are people, the irony of a British Prime Minister standing in Belfast a number of weeks ago and telling us about the great opportunity we have having access to both markets. Well, the British people also had that, and the British government gave it away. When I look towards Scotland and Wales, they would love to have the access that we have. So we've got an economic opportunity that we now need to grab onto, and that means then that we have to abide by the single market rules if we want that opportunity. And I think that there are ways in which we can have input into the things that will be happening. There's different committees that have been established under the protocol arrangements that allows us to input into decisions that are being taken. So I think that if you want to have the huge economic opportunity of a single market access, then you also have to play by the rules.
Good point. So DUP MP Gregory Campbell said he hopes that President Biden's visit would not be used to exert political pressure, presumably on his party, to restore government. Do you think the U.S. does have a role in brokering some kind of resolution to this stalemate, or does that have to have the potential to backfire?
No, I think it's always a very positive role. To achieve a presidential visit and the eyes of the world looking at us, the investment that we've just spoken about, it can always only be a good thing. The United States are heavily invested in our peace process. They were there from its inception. They have stuck with it the last 25 years. Their role has always been a positive role. And I can't see any scenario that where it is not a positive role. So I think the presidential visit would be, I would imagine, in the vein of celebration of the last 25 years, looking towards the hope and opportunity of the next 25 years. And they will encourage, or the president certainly, I'm sure, would encourage all of the parties to work together to make politics work and to deliver the promise of the Good Friday Agreement.
How has your trip gone in the U.S. so far? What have been the things that you most are happy about? And then how can members of Congress in the U.S. and Biden's officials help you achieve your goals?
So it's been a hectic week. Many meetings, many engagements, but many opportunities. I think this week, in the short number of days I've been here already, the highlights have been the fact that we have the US Special Envoy. So I had an opportunity to speak with Joe Kennedy III and to talk about his role in actually helping really drive investment and bring attention to, in terms of investment for Ireland. I think that's a really, really positive and a plus to this week. And then obviously the presidential visit being announced itself. That's a big announcement for us for this week. So I see momentum in being here this week, a potential presidential visit in perhaps a short number of weeks, the Good Friday Agreement anniversary itself. There's nearly like a picture emerging there of a really, very positive choreography of things that could actually work very well for us. And again, we shouldn't miss the moment.
And do you have any message for Congress members, or?
So in all of my engagements, the message is one of commemorating the Good Friday Agreement, that a deal is now done in terms of the protocol, no delay in restoring the executive. And I think that all the Congress people that you meet on the Hill are all very encouraging of us all to make politics work and to get back in and around the executive table. That's the message that's reflected back to me in my engagements, and I've no doubt is reflected to all of the parties. Now, all of the 5 parties of the who've been elected to the Northern Assembly are all here this week. So everybody's here and represented, and I think just it's a good, strong message in itself as well.
Okay. Richard Haas, for years the U.S. Special Envoy to Northern Ireland, recently compared the Troubles to the current division in the U.S., particularly taking into account the January 6th assault on the Capitol. Does this comparison resonate for you, and what advice would you give to those trying for greater peace in the United States?
I think we all learn lessons, don't we? I mean, in our own example, particularly as an island that was partitioned, an island that had its own civil war, an island that then had a very recent conflict, and we're 25 years since the ending of that conflict and a very successful peace accord. I think we all have to continually learn lessons in life. I think the world we live in is changing. The invasion of Ukraine, who would have thought that we'd be facing that type of scenario again, and war in Europe. And I think that political discourse quite often is too harsh. Obviously, we all have our own perspectives, and we can disagree, but we should try to disagree a bit more respectfully. And I think that certainly in a number of events I've been this week, we've all talked about how important relationships are in getting things done. We've all talked about learning lessons from each other, and we've all talked about, a number of people have made reflections just in terms of the political discourse here, and I think that, look, it's a challenging world, the world of politics, but I think that we need to be try to moderate perhaps how we speak to each other, and be having the ability to listen to each other, I think, is very important.
Yeah, those are good. Oh, thank you. Thank you. Can you tell us a little bit more about your domestic politics, as far as, does a strong showing for Sinn Féin in last May's election herald a new resurgence for nationalism, and what do you think voters were reacting to?
So it was a hugely historic election in May. So when the country was partitioned, the northern state was built with a perpetual political unionist majority. That's now gone. Successive elections, even prior to May, have ended that perpetual majority. So the state was designed in such a way that someone like myself, a nationalist, a Republican, was never supposed to come forward or reach to the point where you become First Minister. So that's why the election is so historic. The balance of power has shifted. I think the dynamics behind the election and why people voted, they voted for change. And that, I think that is still, by and large, that would be where public opinion still is today. So a hugely historic election. But I fought that election on the basis that I am a Republican, I am a nationalist, but that I would be a First Minister for all. I mean that. I think that's really, really important in our politics, particularly when you're a society coming from conflict and there can be very, black and white views of things. That's not the world we live in. Things are often much more grey. But I think that for me, being a First Minister for all means that you stretch your boundaries, you step outside your normal comfort zones, you try to listen to other people, different perspectives, you try to reach people. And for me, being a First Minister for all is about change and being someone who's at the helm and leading that change. And I am determined to work with the other parties, and I am determined to be in the executive, and I am determined to turn up every day to do my very best for workers and for families and for communities. That's what you get elected to do.
Do you have plans on what you first want to do when you become the minister?
I do. Where do I start? Because we've been out of the executive since last February. So there are many challenges facing us as a society, and one of the biggest areas that I'm particularly concerned about is violence against women and girls. And it's a real, it's a huge societal problem. And in the north, there is no strategy at this moment in time to tackle violence against women and girls. We just recently had a murder of a young woman who was pregnant, murdered in her own home, and this is becoming all too common. And this is one of the areas that I want to bring a particular focus and attention to. So one of the early things that I want to deliver is a strategy to tackle violence against women and girls, which is a whole of society approach. Misogyny isn't just a female problem; it's a problem for the whole of society that we live in. And I think that's something that all the parties could unite around and actually get together on. So that will be one of my early things, but essentially it's about getting the thing up and running and actually getting us being able to take all the decisions that we need to take on. We need to transform our health service. We have reform in terms of education. We have a lot of transformation work which we need to get stuck into. And I just hope that we get the opportunity to do so.
Can you talk about the opportunities now left before Northern Ireland? Is it really a trade center for both the UK and the EU, or is it now twice as regulated? So.
Oh no, it's absolutely an opportunity. Opportunity all the way. Access to both markets is a huge advantage to us. So as a result of Brexit in the last 7 years, trade across the island has aligned on the island of Ireland, and new opportunities opened up for even smaller companies to provide and to supply into larger companies who perhaps didn't have that opportunity before, but just because of the prior to Brexit trade and reality. So I think that the all-island trade that's now aligned, and it just opens up the door to so much opportunity, and access to 500 million people in the European market, access to the British market. It's a tremendous prize and an asset for us to have. And for me, ultimately, that comes down to growing our economy, improve productivity, creating more jobs, better jobs. It's all about opportunity. There are the benefits of this far, far outweigh any potential issues that people might have in terms of regulation or you're always going to have to play by the rules if you want to access a trade deal. In this case, the single market comes with its own set of rules.
What would you say are the key competitive sectors for the U.S. and international foreign direct investments into Northern Ireland?
So we're doing really well. Have you watched the Oscars recently? Our film industry is actually doing very well. Irish film is really, really coming leaps and bounds. Fintech, cyber security. I mean, we're leading the way in a lot of ways, but the American investment to ourselves is hugely important and a huge, like, it's the largest, obviously, FDI that we have. So I think some of one of the original companies that came to us was Allstate, who've actually reinvested and are employing thousands of people, and that's something that we want to continue to see grow. So that's why this week's very important, because you're getting all these opportunities, particularly with Joe Kennedy now in post as well as the economic envoy. I mean, he'll open doors for us. That'll be great, fantastic opportunities for us.
Awesome. Can you tell us how you feel about Scottish independence and if how that's similar or not similar to Northern Ireland's situation?
Yeah, I think that I think Brexit's been a real catalyst for change, and people are now considering where they're best placed, because they've seen that the British government, the Tory party, because of its own ideological positioning, brought Brexit to us, taking us out of the EU against our wishes. I mean, we voted to remain. Scotland also, and I think that the Scottish independence referendum is very interesting to watch. They've obviously been there before. They hopefully will come back to that again sometime soon. But I think we're living in times where you will see the breakup of the union. I think that is increasingly becoming a conversation that people are watching. And I just think Brexit has been it's just been an eye-opener for people, that they realise that the British government can take decisions so fundamental as that and take you out of the EU without your consent. So that makes it begs the question for people, where are they better placed in the future? Are they better placed within that Brexit Britain, or in our point, an outward-looking inclusive Ireland within the EU? Because that's something else that we have, that if we got to the point where we had a unity referendum and a successful one, then we automatically have re-entry to Europe with the rest of the island. So that's a big sort of, I suppose, factor for people if they're making up their mind at the right point in the future. So we watch with interest what's happening in Scotland, and I think they equally watch what's happening in Ireland as well.
I'm sure. Looking, through Europe a little bit more, what is your feeling about the proper level of aid to Ukraine, and how would you handle what's happening there?
Well, obviously, I mean, I don't think any of us would have imagined that we'd be facing a scenario again where you'd have a war in Europe, and obviously, the Russian aggression must stop. And I think the united international community and the united response has been absolutely, tremendous to see again. And I think we have to come at it in many veins in terms of support. I mean, we have to call it out. It's wrong. It's horrible. What's happening to the people of Ukraine is just so sad to watch. And it's so also equally quite amazing how so many countries have opened up their doors and opened up their arms to take in people who need to flee Ukraine. And I think, like, even in Ireland, the fact that we have had such strong humanitarian aid has been amazing. So I just think that we need to stay united. We need to get to the point where this war is ended. We need to get to the point that we never slip in terms of our united front, in terms of facing down Putin.
Do you have feelings as to, like, if this continues on for a longer term, like if there's level of aid should be capped at a certain point, or?
No, I think that we have to do everything as an international community to end the war. I mean, it's as simple as that. It needs to be stopped as quickly as possible. We need all of us to be engaged in terms of whatever support that we may bring or whatever angle we come from it. But we have to be engaged together, and it has to be stopped. And we all have a vested interest in ensuring that is the case.
Do you have, what other concerns do you have about, when you take the government, climate change, or do you have other topics of?
Yeah, so our locally elected assembly in Stormont has limitations. So there are powers that are devolved to it, and there are powers that are not. One of the things that we don't have is fiscal levers. We don't have the ability to raise money in which to invest in public services. So that's a huge problem and a huge disadvantage for us. So I think that whenever it comes to functioning assembly and executive, that this is one of the areas that's going to be most challenging for us. So if we got the executive up and running tomorrow, which I want, and I hope we get there, one of the biggest challenges facing every political party around that table will be the fact that the budget in which we have to live with has been slashed for 12 plus years because of Tory austerity. So we get a block grant, we get an allocation of funding from the British government, and over the last 12 years they have cut that continually. They have slashed public services, they've brought the health service to its knees, and then we're faced with decisions as locally elected ministers trying to nearly mitigate against the worst impact of Tory austerity. And collectively, we all find that very challenging. So even a functioning executive tomorrow will face huge budgetary concerns. And whilst if there's one thing that would probably unite us all, even today in this moment, will be we need additional finances to make it work. We need to be able to invest in our public services. We need to be able to transform our health service, our education system. We need to support public sector workers. We need to make it fair, give them fair pay and working conditions. But we need money in which to do those things. So if there'd be one collective voice, I would imagine, from all of the political parties at home to say we need extra money to make the wheels go round and actually allow us to do our job.
Right. What can the U.S. media do better in telling the story of Northern Ireland?
I think you're doing a good job. You have me here today. I think the media here is equally as invested. I think down through the years has followed the story, have charted the journey of the Good Friday Agreement. I think there's a fair level of understanding here in terms of the media of our circumstance, certainly in any of the engagements I've done this week. That's my experience. So continue to, I suppose, assist in bringing that attention to us, which we want, particularly given the year that's in it and the Good Friday Agreement anniversary. If we get a restored executive up and running, I'm sure that'll be widely reported on too. So just, I think it's a good relationship and let it continue.
That's great. Does anyone have any other questions? Okay. So before I ask the last question then, I wanted to thank our headliners, co-chairs, Donna Line-Wan-Leger and Lori Russo, our club event coordinator, Cecily Scott-Martin, our executive director, Bill McCarran, and our AV staff for helping organize and produce this event. I especially wanted to thank Ms. O'Neill and her team for traveling so far to be with us. It's my honor to present to you our much coveted National Press Club mug.
Fantastic.
There you go.
Very good. Thank you so much.
Yeah, of course.
My pleasure.
And then, okay. So as you know, we talked about this a little bit back there, but a film set in rural Northern Ireland, An Irish Goodbye, won an Oscar this week. It received support from the government-funded Northern Ireland Screen, which promotes Irish language broadcasting. What would you like people in the United States to know about culture, creativity, and the art scene in Northern Ireland?
It's just amazing to watch, and An Irish Goodbye is a great example. We're all very, very, very proud of all of the team, but particularly James, who lifted the Oscar on the night of his birthday. So that's something to be really very much celebrated. And also it's another example of a young man breaking a glass ceiling. So it would do your heart good. We have a fantastic growing film industry. We've way more to do, but some of the best TV programmes have been shot in Ireland. And I think that it's just one of those industries, when you asked me earlier about one of the industries that you watch for that are being successful, the film industry is certainly that. And just the growth is just amazing. It's just like exploded. So I think that we've got a lot more potential, and I would encourage anybody in the industry to look us up and give us a shout. We've something to offer.
Excellent. Well, great. Well,
Thank
you
you
very much.
Thank you.
That
Great.
is awesome. Thanks. I know you have to run, but
Yeah, I have to go to the State Department.